And it looks like we are live. Guys, give me just a second here. As you know, we have to get our Facebook groups in here to join us on what is a wonderful Friday evening here for the NFL Combine. Man, super, super stoked to get in here and talk some wonderful draft prospects with you guys. Mile high hello, everybody in Broncos country. Welcome into another episode of the Dell Valley Deep Divers podcast. I am your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me, as per usual, is my good friend and colleague. He is Mile High Huddle's senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. And dude, like I just got done saying, man, the combine has been going yesterday and today. Tight ends are still currently on the field doing their on-field drills as we are currently speaking to you guys. How are you doing? You keeping up with everything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm currently watching the tight ends run the gauntlet as we're doing the show, and been up and watching every single rep that I can. Obviously, with the NFL Network coverage, you don't always get to see every rep, but I'm, taking my notes, watching what I can, seeing what I can, and just using the combine as it should be. It's part of the evaluation, and it's mostly about, you know, checking boxes, confirming what you have, your notes that you have on tape, making sure that everything just adds up. And if something doesn't, typically I always go back and take a look at that player, go back and watch a couple more games of theirs and see if I start seeing it and try to just, go from there.
Yeah, man, it's really an interesting way of going about your scouting process is going back and checking over the tape. These numbers that you're getting, the athletic testing, obviously the 40-yard dash, the shuttle drills, the vertical jump, the broad jump, stuff like that. That all goes back into watching the tape and confirming those biases. Maybe a guy doesn't necessarily look as explosive on tape as he does within his athletic testing, going back and doing those rechecks, or maybe even confirming something. A guy like a guy I know you like specifically, Quinion Mitchell, the cornerback out of Toledo, explosive athlete, goes out and runs a 4.33 40-yard dash earlier today to lead all cornerbacks in terms of speed. That's a big part of what we use within these combine numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's always about going back and matching up with what you see on tape. And I mean, just before we went live, we were talking about it. There's a tight end who absolutely killed the explosion testing, the vertical and broad jumps. It's where you get the explosion numbers from. Doesn't match up with this tape. And I was just talking about how I'm going to be going back and watching him and seeing where, if that shows up on tape. And then you also have to factor in the fact that a lot of these guys, they'll either add weight, which may hurt their testing, or they'll drop weight, which could help their testing, and have to try to answer. That's just another problem that you have to solve. And NFL teams, they have a much easier ability to do that. I don't have, for me, it's a lot more difficult, and I just do the best I can with it and just, go through the evaluation as best I can with, the information I have.
Yeah, and that's one of the hard things is not having the raw testing numbers. This is where everybody gets together side by side, and you can actually look at these players side by side, get their height, their weight, their arm length, their wingspan, everything that goes into this. You can see them side by side, athletically tested, one on one against each other, essentially. Throughout their position groups. Let's say hello to everybody else in the chat here. We got David McElrath, Papa Bear, jumping in here early with a $2 super chat. Good evening, Broncos country. Hashtag Mays or McCarthy. Drake May or JJ McCarthy, talking about the quarterbacks here. Unfortunately, we're not going to see a Drake May throw at the combine. JJ McCarthy is going to throw. He's not going to test, though. In terms of the on-field drills here, Erick, I want to kind of break this down a little bit. When you're looking at these on-field drills, how do they translate specifically to the quarterback position?
So the quarterback position is a little bit more difficult with the drills. You just kind of want to make sure that, they're playing with a clean base. The foundation is fine. The throwing motion is clean and crisp. It's not so much about how far they're throwing it. I mean, obviously you want them to be on target, but it's more about the biomechanics and the just the techniques and stuff that they have playing the quarterback position that you want to watch more than anything with it. And it's like that with all the positions, really. Quarterbacks even more so, because just the scenario that you're in of being, the underwear Olympics, of just making sure that they have the clean mechanics. And oftentimes you'll watch them, they'll make a throw, something may not be the cleanest. And so a coach will come up and talk to them. And when they go back out there for the next throw, do they have that corrected, or is it improved? How well they take the coaching, that is something that matters a lot. And not only that, are they paying attention? I mean, it's not a quarterback, but there's a corner that in working on my risers and fallers for the combine, there's a corner that every time he got out there for the drills, he had to constantly be corrected with what he was doing, with where to line up and how to run the drill. Like he wasn't paying attention as other people were doing it. And that is something that NFL teams will notice. It's something that I notice. And it's definitely not the biggest of, hits to their stock or anything like that, but it's definitely a negative for them.
Yeah, Kathy Schmidl jumping in here as well from across the pond with a €2 donation here. Hi, Lance and Eric. Hello, Broncos country. Hello, Kathy. Thank you for joining us here on a wonderful Friday evening. Michael Ronquillo jumping in here. The Ronk, as he wants to do every single night here on the Mile High Huddle Podcast Network. Good evening, Lance and Eric on the Dove Valley Deep Divers Podcast. Go Broncos. Go, Michael. Thank you for your support, as we always want to give you. Naj, our boy Naj Althoff jumping in here off the top rope with the $20 super chat. Hey, brothers, hope all is well. Just showing some support. Cheers. Thank you, Naj. We definitely appreciate your support. It's good to see you in the chat, man. You should get in here more often. Come in and chop it up with us. We always have so much fun hanging out with you at the Mile High Huddle meet and greet, as we've done a couple of different times in the past. It's always good to see you here, Naj, man. We definitely appreciate that. We got another one in here as well. Gary Palmer, GLP, again off the top rope with a $20 super chat. Hi, Lance and Eric. Stoked to see your guys' evaluations. Go Broncos, and go everybody here in the chat. Thank you all for joining us and showing the wonderful support, man. Eric, I want to get back to a little bit of the on-field drills. You were talking about a player, as a cornerback specifically. This happened earlier today. Dwight McLaughlin, out of Arkansas. You were talking about just being lined up in the wrong position, man. And something that, like you said, it's not necessarily a huge deal in terms of evaluating his draft stock and his ability to play football, but his ability to be coaching. Is that something you're looking at when you go to the combine? Obviously, that they get these players behind the scenes and do some whiteboard work and stuff like that. Get to know a little bit of their football IQ. The on-field drills not lining up correctly multiple times, is that something that is like showing a lack of being able to be coached?
I don't think it's showing a lack of being unable to get coached, because when the coaches were sitting there and would correct him, he would immediately correct it. But I think it shows a thing of that he just wasn't paying attention, which is why it's just a slight knock for him. I mean, it's the guy Dwight McLaughlin, and he's probably the 10th to 15th corner that's going on these drills, and every single drill he had to be corrected with where to line up at. Like by that point, hey, if it was one thing like, oh, your hand placement has to be in a very specific spot, that's one thing, but that wasn't the case here. It was, okay, you start on the X and that's where you start the drill at. And he's lining up everywhere but the X. So yeah, it's a negative. It's something that you pay attention to. It's something that you do. Not a big hit, but I mean, you're at the combine. You kind of want to be paying attention to the drills that are going before you, because you can learn a lot from those drills that can help you have an impressive drill.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. Phil McLaughlin jumping in here with some stars over on Facebook. Thank you, Phil, for your continued support here for the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Good evening, Lance, Eric, and Deacon Scott. Any player that has really stood out, good or bad, at the combine? Hashtag Buckham, hashtag MHH for life, hashtag Broncos for life. Now, Eric, this is kind of how I wanted to go with this conversation. And I know that I'm jumping around all over the place right now, but just bear with me a little bit, guys. But let's go back to yesterday a little bit, because you and I haven't got a chance to really sit down and talk about this. Yesterday, we got to watch the defensive linemen and the edge defenders and some linebackers go in the position drills. And quite honestly, one of the bigger names that really stood out was Florida State defensive lineman Braden Fisk, man. This dude has shown out at the Senior Bowl, and then he went out and just dominated in the movement and position drills at the combine, man. What did you think of his performance?
Yeah, I mean, he's explosive on tape. He was explosive at the Senior Bowl, and he showed the explosiveness during the athletic testing. And then watching, for me, I wanted to see his technique in the drills. You can see it on tape, and then seeing it, there in the drills, making sure that everything is consistent and clean. And yeah, I mean, he probably has helped himself the best out of all the prospects so far over these last 2 days. With day and 3/4 or 9/10 or whatever, since the tight ends are finishing up. He's probably been the best of the bunch. I mean, everything was clean, everything was consistent. he was sitting there. He was one thing I noticed yesterday when watching it through is that he was consistently, off to the sideline talking with one of the coaches that are there, one of the scouts. He was talking with other defensive linemen, helping them out. Just all these things that you look for, even outside of the drills he was doing. He's a guy that, for me, I can't remember exactly where he ended up on my top 100, but he's a guy that I'm probably going to be bumping up significantly, probably not to a first round pick, but probably solidifying him somewhere in the second round in the top 5 interior defensive lineman for me.
Yeah, quite honestly, it was one of the more impressive performances I think I've seen at the combine in quite some time, to tell you the truth, because his athletic testing was great. He let out a big "oh yeah" after his first 40-yard dash attempt. I think he ran a 4.67 or something like that. Massive numbers for this guy. He was just incredible. And like you said, the position drills, he did slip a lot. And that's something that I've noted, you and I both have noted over the course of the first couple of days here. Players are slipping a lot all over the field. And with him, every time he did slip, he exploded back up off the ground and got right back into the drill and continued to show that explosive athleticism. So that was something really nice to see from him. Another player that really has kind of stood out for the most part is Byron Murphy from Texas. Potential first round pick, a top 20 player on most players' boards, or most people's boards. This guy, again, went out there and just dominated. It looked different with him on the field in those movement drills, man.
Yeah, the Muppet had a great day. I mean, the thing is, he was expected to test out extremely well athletically. Former running back, and has just gotten bigger, moved over to the defensive side of the ball, I think to linebacker, and then moved down to defensive line. And the athleticism as he's gotten bigger has just been there. Like with some of these guys, you always have that concern of, oh, if we add more bulk to their mass or to their frame, will they lose some of that athleticism? And Murphy, with the way they added it and how he's just grown with it, the athleticism is still there. Super explosive, another guy with the clean technique. And it was fun listening to them talk about a knee drop technique that he has to hold up against double teams. Because that's becoming even more and more popular in the NFL. And the fact that it's something that his defensive line coach has worked with him extensively to help him hold up at the point of attack. It's good to hear, and it's good to see when you watch his tape anyways, how clean and consistent that is.
Yeah, man, that knee drop technique that they were talking about was very interesting. I'd seen that before, but I never actually knew that it was like part of a run defense repertoire. It's specifically used to like battle off double teams because it helps you get different leverage. You get lower pad level, and then you can explode from that position to try to blow through double teams. It's a very interesting technique, something that I want to kind of take a deeper dive into in terms of watching out for when I'm watching defensive linemen. Casey Nickel coming in here with a $5 super chat. I'm getting too much hope we're getting JJ McCarthy. Please talk me off the ledge. Erick, you and I, when this process first started, were down on JJ McCarthy. I'm not necessarily all the way in on him specifically because I think that there's still some issues. He's just so raw, and he has a good arm, good athleticism, throws with timing, accuracy. The tools are there. But the more that I'm coming around to it, the more I'm like, JJ McCarthy might be the quarterback for this team, man. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like with JJ McCarthy. He's a guy that has definitely grown on me. The more I watch of him, the more I like him. I think he's kind of cemented himself for now. Obviously, we'll see him not test tomorrow, but see him throw at the combine. And then the pro day will probably get the testing, and that might bump him up a little bit. But he's there for me as a mid, first round player. And I think that he's probably going to go top 10. I wouldn't. There's a chance he can go top 5. With four quarterbacks in the top 5. I don't think we see a 5th quarterback in the first round at the moment. But yeah, I mean, depends on what will happen with Justin Fields, because Atlanta, they've been linked with him quite a bit. The Giants have been linked with, going after these quarterbacks. The Patriots, they want to rebuild the quarterback room. The Chargers are in a prime position to move down because they need so much help, but they have that quarterback. They can get a couple extra picks. The Titans, there's been some chatter that they may not be fully set on sticking with Will Levis, and bringing in a new quarterback with a new coaching staff as well. there. So there's a lot of options: Minnesota Vikings, Raiders, Broncos, of course, Saints. A lot of guys that want to get up. So I would not be shocked if we see McCarthy go in the top 10.
Well, and couple things here. I want to spin this off in a couple different directions. First things first, you said that you don't think that there's going to be a fifth quarterback going in the first round. I brought this up to you a little bit, but I want you to elaborate here for everybody here watching us. In terms of the fifth-year option, we've seen that a couple of years ago with Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens trading back into the first round to go and get him to secure that fifth-year option. For quarterbacks, though, this conversation is starting to change a little bit, man. And you brought up something interesting with the salary cap. Will you elaborate on that for everybody here watching tonight?
Yeah, for me, I always had a high value on getting that fifth-year option for the quarterbacks. But then I was talking with a guy that one of my sources in the NFL, and he was bringing up how for quarterbacks, the fifth-year option is kind of a lesser, not necessarily, it's not at the added value that it used to be because it's not as much cost control anymore. Justin Fields' fifth-year option is going to be $25 million. And here pretty soon, by the time these guys are hitting that fifth year or that fourth year where you have to pick up the option, you're probably looking at 30 plus million for that fifth year option. And what he said was that it would be at least the team that he's with, they feel that it's better for them to get to that point of we need an extension earlier instead of biding more time by using that fifth year option. So we'll take the 4 years and just do the extension after year 3 and being able to have a little bit more flexibility with how it's structured instead of having that fifth year option, doing it a year later after the fourth year option, or even after year 3 and having a little less, flexibility with how they can structure that contract.
Yeah, and see, that makes a lot of sense because when you look at the quarterback conversation in terms of contracts right now, I mean, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, guys like Aaron Rodgers, obviously Russell Wilson with his contract that's going to be moved on from, but still, Dak Prescott, his cap hit for this next season is going to be $59.5 million. You're talking over $50 million, and I don't remember the exact structure of how the fifth year option works, but I believe it's the average of the top 10 quarterback salaries is the fifth year option, depending on if you get some performance escalated, something like that. Regardless, that fifth year option, like you said,
it's also boosted by Pro Bowls, All Pros.
Right. Yep.
It's boosted by all these other things as well.
Yeah, and like you said, Justin Fields $25 million or something like that for his fifth year option. So when you get moving this forward, you're talking a tail end of the first round, a guy like a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix Jr., where they're 25 years old coming into the NFL, 24, 25 years old. That fifth year, by the time they get to that fifth year option, they're 30 years old and they haven't even seen their second contract yet. You don't know what they're going to be, and they're going to be pushing $35 to $40 million by that particular point based on just the salary cap alone. So that's a massive investment for you to want to have to trade up mortgage, future draft capital, or whatever it may be to go up and get a guy like that. So that's a very interesting conversation to bring to the fold here.
And I pulled up the numbers here. And so Justin Fields, we're talking about those escalators. Well, you have an escalator for multiple Pro Bowls, 1 Pro Bowl, playing time, and then your basic. So for quarterbacks, I mean, Justin Fields' is fifth year option is the same as Mac Jones, and it's the same as Trevor Lawrence. Like, so that just adds to this value that quarterbacks have taken a hit for having that fifth year option. Whereas the basic one, which Zach Wilson and Trey Lance are getting, is $22.5 million. And so this is going to keep going up over the next few years because quarterback contracts are keep going up because it does deal with the, the averages of these other contracts. Whereas a lot of these other positions, I mean, wide receiver, you're looking at a little over 20 million with multiple Pro Bowls, but basic, that's only 15 million. For offensive line, you're looking at, roughly about 20 million. Penei Sewell and Rashawn Slater sitting there at the top with it, with 1 Pro Bowl underneath them being just a little over 19 million. We get Patrick Surtain, who has multiple Pro Bowls there. He's at the highest of tier of this, just under 20 million. So when you value in that and the positional value of it, yes, quarterbacks have such a high positional value. But if you don't want to get to this point where you're stuck with potentially picking up this fifth year option for a quarterback who you may or may not be unsure on, like imagine if the Bears didn't get the first overall pick from Carolina. Imagine instead both their picks were 9 and in the teens or whatever. They're going to be stuck. They would be stuck in a hard place with what to do with Justin Fields, who hasn't shown enough to be worth that, but they would still need a quarterback. So it's the fifth year option is it's just a little bit more risky anymore with how the price of it is spiking.
Yeah, exactly, man. Like I said, it's so interesting to talk about the salary cap and all of that stuff. It's really fun, especially with this quarterback class this year specifically, because we're at the tail end of the COVID years. We've got a bunch of fifth year seniors and stuff like that. Obviously, Bo Nix and Michael Penix, those guys like that. Regardless, let's get back to the NFL Combine here. And Eric, let's go back to the defensive line just a little bit. We talked about the two top performers, obviously Braden Fisk and Byron Murphy. There's a couple of other guys that I thought really stood out, but I want your two, like the biggest guys that you stood out the most for you in the defensive line group, the interior defensive line group.
I mean, overall, I think the interior defensive line group had a very strong showing overall. For his size, Devondre Sweat, I thought absolutely did a good job with that. I mean, 366 pounds, and he was moving pretty clean for a guy that size. Chris Jenkins, I thought absolutely killed it. We talked about Byron Murphy a little bit, and Braden Fisk. I thought Fabian Lovett, Fisk's teammate from Florida State, had a really good showing. Rook Orororo is out of Clemson, is another guy who I think he really showed that potential that he has.
Yeah,
It's all
freaky
about
athleticism.
developing that. It's all about developing the football side of things, and he showed some improvement there. Let's see, Mekhi Wingo, I think, if he was a little bit taller, a little bit longer, we'd probably be talking about him a little bit more or a little bit higher in the draft. He just doesn't have, the modern size that you want anymore with it. I mean, he makes Byron Murphy and Jerzon Newton look, big essentially. So those, I mean, there's multiple others. Logan Lee, unfortunately, an Iowa player, he had
The
a great
Iowa guy.
but yeah, I mean, it's easier to pick guys who didn't look good on the interior defensive line than it is just to talk about the guys who did without naming everybody, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm right there with you. We got William James Baker here. First time I'm seeing your name on our chat. Thank you for joining us, William. We definitely appreciate your support, and stick around a little bit. Hopefully you enjoy what you're viewing here on a wonderful Friday evening. London Broncos, it's 1:25 a.m. over there. Hope all is good with you guys. Guys, I like the look of Braden Fisk and Murphy at defensive tackle. Do you think the Broncos will get one of the top 5 defensive tackles, or what I like us to do is trade back at 12 and get Nix the quarterback and a couple of picks backs? What do you think, Eric?
I Nix is obviously an option for the Broncos. I think his fit is fine. I put up some numbers on him and top 12 of the quarterbacks in here. 70% of his throws, this is something that I talked about a couple weeks ago, but 70% of his throws were under 10 yards to behind the line of scrimmage. 30% of those were at the line of scrimmage or behind it. So high percentage of throws of a high percentage of completion percentage throws were made, which definitely boosts his numbers a little bit. He can work in the Bo Nix system. I think I've seen a lot of people talk about how he's the perfect fit. I don't think he is the perfect fit. I think he's a solid one. I think the issues with consistently pushing the ball with velocity is a big thing. Yes, he can throw it deep, but he has to have a high arc on it. He can't throw it. There's not always consistent velocity on those throws. The nose of the ball tends to drop a little bit. So if they could trade back and pick him up, maybe they do take him with the late first round pick. Maybe they trade back and pick up a earlier second round pick or a mid second round pick, or move down a couple times, whatever the case may be. I wouldn't mind Nix at all in the early second round, just because, again, going back to that 5th year option that we talked about a little bit, he is one of those guys that I would rather not have that 5th year option on, even though you get to pick it up before year 4. Just with the changes that they've made with the 5th year option itself and the guarantees with it, just makes me a little hesitant to, be willing to have that.
No, I'm with you on that one. And quite honestly, I think that the more that I look at it, Byron Murphy might be another one of those players that if it's not a quarterback at 12, that I would probably be more comfortable with the Broncos taking, just based on the need and the positional value of having an interior defensive lineman that can crash the pocket and just be a complete disruptor in the passing game. He's a quality run defender up there as a let's see, a 2-eye to 5 technique. Quite honestly, he can play pretty much all over the interior of the defensive line. So I think his best fit is a 3-tech interior nose penetrator, interior pass penetrator, excuse me. But there's another conversation, Eric. I want just quickly here. We got some news earlier today. Enyomo Awazurike was just had all of his charges dropped for gambling. And I know that doesn't necessarily come back to the combine, but it is newsworthy for the Broncos because that's an interior defensive lineman that the Broncos were kind of not really banking on, but hoping that they were going to see some quality development and growth out of this last season. Obviously, it's suspended for the entire year. I know that you have some good things to say about him. What is the outlook for him coming forward this season?
Well, I mean, everybody probably who's watched it probably remembers, our heated exchange about Uwazurike, and then a couple weeks later, we find out that he was betting on Broncos games that he played in, and my whole thought on him just completely shifted. But that said, throughout this, I've asked, people that I talked to have consistently praised Uwazurike and the progress he was showing, leading up to a suspension in July last year. He can reapply for He can apply for reinstatement here in July, at the end of July this year. They kept it was consistent praise even after the stuff it came out of identity theft, being part of it, betting on Broncos games that he played in, things like that. Even after that stuff came out, they still consistently praised him. And if they weren't going to give him a chance, it would have been so easy for them to be like, oh, no, we're going to be done with him. Like, we just got to wait for him to be reinstated and we're going to be done. And maybe things can change between now and then. And time comes, he gets reinstated and they release him. It happened with one of the guys that was suspended with the Colts when he got reinstated. They kept him around. They were planning on keeping him around, and then he gets reinstated and they decided, well, we like who we have now. We're just going to move on from you. That type of situation can play out. So it's something to keep an eye on. Maybe he'll get a shot. They were betting on him being a starter last year before he got suspended. It's why they didn't do a whole lot of work on the defensive line room in the first place. So we'll see what happens.
That last point that you just said was the one that I wanted to kind of get to. That was a big reason why they didn't do a whole lot of work on the defensive line this last season. And that's why I think that I'm more comfortable with a guy like Byron Murphy at number 12 overall, because he can step in and be a true disruptor as a pass rusher and be a true pair for Zach Allen, who was a one-man show this last season. It doesn't sound like DJ Jones is going to be brought back. It sounds like he's probably going to be released here in the next week or so. So the more that I'm getting comfortable with some of these players at number 12 overall, I think that if it's not a quarterback, I think Olu Fashanu, Brock Bowers, and Byron Murphy would be the 3 players that I would be the most comfortable with the Broncos staying at number 12 overall and selecting if they were to do so. So that was kind of the overarching point that I wanted to get to that. So thank you for elaborating a little bit there on that for me. Let's go to the outside, the defensive ends and edge rushers. There was a lot of high-end athleticism out there displayed, and obviously the top 3 guys in this class, Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, Laiatu Latu, not specifically in that particular order, all really showed out. But man, Dallas Turner, what a performance.
Yeah, I mean, he started off with a 6'6" wingspan, which is pretty insane. Did extremely well in all the testing. Went out there, did the position drills, absolutely killed it. I've said before, I'm on record multiple times that I don't think there's a Batman at the edge position in this. I think, I went back and watched a little bit more of him last night. A couple games that I hadn't had access to watch yet. Finally was able to get access to that tape. Watch those. I don't think he can be like, that top tier of edge rushers or even that second tier of edge rushers, but I think there's some Batman capabilities to be in that tier 3, which is still a pretty high quality starter and at the edge position, and be that leader as a pass rusher for a defense. I mean, it just everything was clean. It was improved. It was quick. And the biggest one thing too is like, you want to look for smoothness and how easy it seems. Whatever the drill was, it always seemed like it was easy for him. Like he wasn't putting a lot of effort into it, and it just led to it being very smooth. I think I'm gonna have to calculate, the grades and stuff after I add the adjustments for the combine, but I'm pretty sure this is gonna cement him as, my top edge rusher in this class.
I'm right there with you, and this is coming from a huge fan of Latu, who also had a tremendous showing at the combine. His movement skills were on display. You see the technical refinement in his lower half. You got to see the burst and explosion. You got to see the bend. That was something I didn't necessarily think that he had coming into the combine. His ring drill. They run a figure eight, run around the corner, pick up a towel, run around the other corner, put it down, pick up another towel, come back around. He ran a damn near perfect figure eight around it with great bend, great hand placement. It was very, very fluid, man. But Dallas Turner, when he was out there, it was a different level of movement skills, man. And Jared Verse was fine too. I thought that he had a really good showing. But something that you had noted in our chat before we finished watching everything last night was there was a very clear tier here. It was tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and it was easy to see that. Will you explain a little bit why you thought that?
I mean, it's all about, I mean, we talked about this before. It's all about checking boxes, and sometimes even answering concerns, making you want to go back to that. Before I continue this, I want to say to William, glad you found us. We appreciate you joining us. You're new here. Well, that's fine. I mean, you always got to bring fresh faces into the chat as well. So we appreciate you. Glad you found us and everything like that, and hope you enjoyed the shows. A lot of different personalities on a lot of different shows, and some of us can be what's the right word here? A little polarizing, I guess would be the word. But we're glad that you joined us.
Yeah. Welcome
so
in.
Going back to it, is one thing is that I've started doing more so is tiering prospects instead of flat out rankings. Like, just because a guy is, say 5th overall for me and another guy who's at the same position as 7th overall doesn't mean they're in the same tiers necessarily. So with this, I think that with what we saw from, Chop Robinson, Latu, Verse, Turner, Braswell, Trice, all these top edge rushers that a lot of people kept talking about, they're pretty close together. With what we saw from the drills, what we got from the athletic testing, what we've heard from, or what I've picked up from medicals and been reported about the medicals and interviews, it seems that there is a clear top 2 guys, and that's Turner and Latu. Then you have Verse as a tier 2 guy, and then you have a group of like 3 guys who are led by Chop Robinson as that tier 3 of the edges, and it just seemed to kind of like solidify themselves in these different tiers.
Yeah, and Chop Robinson had another tremendous showing out there. He was fluid. He ran a 4.49 at 248 pounds or 200 something. I can't remember what he weighed in, but it was a good weight for him, and it was a very good 40 for him. Like, that was something that a lot of people were concerned about, was that he was going to come in a little bit light, and he checked that box where he came in at the right around the 248 to 255, somewhere around there for an edge defender. And then he runs 4.49 doing so. He also jumped out of the building and then was out there just showing freak athleticism in terms of the position drills. Like, Chop Robinson was another guy that just really stood out. One that I have a different opinion than you on, in terms of I guess not really what he brings to the field, but just his overall build and stuff like that. Something that you brought up a couple different times. Muhammad Kamara out of Colorado State comes in 248 pounds, 4.58 on the 40, and he looked tremendous out there in terms of fluidity, explosiveness in the position drills. What did you think of his performance?
I thought he looked really good, but he just kind of confirmed what he is.
Okay.
I've been a lot harsher on him than I should have been. Very explosive. Can fires off the ball, can run around, turn the edge, but can he go through a blocker? You're not in the NFL, you're not going to be able to go around a guy every single time, and I just don't see it with him, which is going to push it down. The production is outstanding. Like, yes, don't get me wrong, it's absolutely insane the amount of production that he's had at Colorado State, but it's just production doesn't always translate to being a good prospect. And he's not a bad prospect. I think he's just a very limited one that is going to be a very niche pass rusher in the NFL that can only be used on very obvious passing downs, because you do not want him as a blocker. I mean, at the Shrine game, he was going up against his teammate, I believe, Dallin Holker, the tight end, who had a pretty good showing today. And Holker's not a great blocker by any means. And he was just completely bullying Kamara. Like it was absolutely insane. He looked like he was an all-star blocking tight end out there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very rough watch. And for me, one thing, run defense matters a lot to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, so if you're an edge rusher, if you're an interior defensive lineman, if you're a linebacker, it doesn't matter where you're at on defense. If you have issues against the run, you are going to take a pretty significant hit from me, unless you are absolutely phenomenal as a prospect, as a pass rusher, or in coverage.
Yeah, that's something that I value a lot as well. That versatility, not only position versatility, but what do you bring in terms of all three downs, whether offensively or defensively? And I don't disagree with you. Muhammad Kamara can get pushed around in terms of run defense, and you see it on his tape. Like you said, twitchy, explosive, bendy, a very productive player in terms of getting after the quarterback. But again, another one of those players that gets pushed around a lot in terms of run defense. Erick, let's go to players that kind of disappointed you. I don't want to be like throw anybody under the bus here, but somebody that like didn't meet your expectations or kind of had a poor showing out there this week.
Oh man, I wish I
At
still
least on the defensive. Let's go defensive line specifically, not what happened today. Defensive line from yesterday.
I wish I still had my notes from yesterday. So let me see. Trying to think of the guys. Brendan Dorlus out of Oregon.
Yeah, that was
As I
one
look
I
at
knew
my
you were going to
scouting
go
list
to.
here, he was a guy who was, he's a bit of a tweener, and you were looking for him to kind of confirm if he can play last inside or work on the edge. And instead, all he did was he confirmed that he can do neither. Another guy who I actually was pretty high on, McKinley Jackson, very short, stout run defender. Doesn't offer a whole lot of juice as a pass rusher. I was hoping to see a little bit more explosion and burst out of him, because there are times where you can see it on tape, but he just completely, whiffed doing that. Leonard Taylor out of Miami, I thought he had a really bad showing. Justin Eboigbe out of Alabama, he was another guy that I thought was pretty rough overall.
Mm-hmm.
When watching him, and the movement skills particularly, very labored mover. So for the defensive line, those are the guys that probably stand out the most. LSU had three guys who, two of them stood out quite a bit positively. It's just a matter of teaching to be a football. But at the edge position, again, it's a tough one. Couple guys that I was looking forward to see that we didn't test or didn't work out there. Nelson Caesar out of Houston, he worked out and everything. He was one that I thought was pretty rough consistently out there. Javonte Jean Baptiste out of Notre Dame. It was a very rough showing, and with him, I want to add some context to it. I guess Wednesday night he came down with food poisoning that he was battling with, through yesterday morning. He hadn't eaten anything until noon yesterday, a little bit before the combine, before the workout started. It was the first time he ate in 24 hours. So the fatigue and all that you're dealing from
Mm-hmm.
after dealing with food poisoning definitely set in with him a little bit. He is better on tape. So even though the poor combine performance, knowing that he was sick, it'll ease his drop a little bit. And then Braylon Trice. I mean, this is a dude
Yeah,
who
that's mm-hmm.
there is no worse decision a prospect can make than getting hurt doing a drill or a thing and trying to, or a athletic test, and trying to force themselves through the rest of it. And that's what happened with Trice.
Mm-hmm.
There was a point
Yep.
early on, I can't remember what drill they were doing. He pulls up and he grabs at his thigh, and then you see him out there, continuously trying and struggling. And it's very
Mm-hmm.
obvious that he was hurt and trying to force through it. And that's just going to put, some bad drill work out there for NFL teams. That the drills, I can't remember which general manager it was. And sorry for the long-winded answer here.
No, you're good.
One of the general managers was answering a question from Rich Eisen and Daniel Jeremiah today about how they use the drills at the combine. And again, it's about using, technique and all that. But the drill work they do at the combine, if they have two guys with a close grade, the drill work could often be used as a tiebreaker for them, at
Mm-hmm.
least for this general manager's team. And so forcing yourself through it while hurt is definitely going to lead to some bad drill work.
Yeah, and Braylon Trice, that was the one name that I was hoping you were going to bring up, because he was slipping all over the field. He at the one drill, I think it was the four bag drill. He almost looked confused, and he kept kicking his feet around, and it looked like he was just completely uncomfortable. And you could tell that he was in distress when he came off of that. He didn't look great in the figure 8 drill. He didn't look great dropping it when they did the small little drop into coverage drill that they had. It was one of the more frustrating showings, because I think that's a good football player out there, and to see him have to deal with that and then put that bad tape out there for everybody to watch, it's got to be frustrating for him. It's got to be very disappointing, and disappointing for some of these other teams. But something that I do want to give in terms of the positive on that, the silver lining for him: you went out there and you competed. You were hurt and you were injured, and you still went out there and you showed that you were willing to put that, like, at least put the effort out there. And that's something that teams are going to gravitate towards that. Maybe in the later rounds of the draft, this guy wants to put the effort in. He wants to hustle. He wants to work. That might be the only positive thing that you can take away from his performance, but I think that's something good that you can take away from it. David Youngkin jumping in here with a $2 super chat. Just wanted to show some love. Thank you, David, for joining us as you do here every single Friday evening. Let's see, 40 minutes here. We got just a little bit of time. Eric, brief overview thoughts here on the linebackers. I think that there was 3 guys that really stood out last night. Edgerrin Cooper, man, he was great. Dang it, what's Jeremiah Trotter Jr. was another one that really stood out. And then Peyton Wilson. Dude, everything that you knew about Peyton Wilson watching him on tape, he confirmed everything that you knew. Fluid, athletic, just incredible twitch and explosiveness, man. What did you think of the linebacker class last night?
Well, I mean, I think Jeremiah Trotter was a guy who just proved what he is.
Mm-hmm.
He is a sideline to sideline downhill player. Don't ask him working coverage, because the drills that he did in coverage were awful. Edgerrin Cooper, he cemented himself as one of the top 2 linebackers in this class. Peyton Wilson, he's number 3, and while everything's been positive about his injuries, it's still enough of a concern to keep him there.
Yep.
As a number 3 corner, I think what's his name? Trevin Wallace out of Kentucky and Tyrese Knight both had great showings. Tyron Hopper also had a great day out of Missouri. But the one I really want to shout out is my Edufwan Ulo-Foshio. Again, I may have butchered that name, but he's an Alaskan. Grew up here. He actually has an answer at the combine talking about one of his first run-ins with the Moose. Going back to last year, I actually made multiple jokes about how he's linebacker 1 for this year because he's an Alaskan. Broncos need to add more Alaskan blood to their team. Broncos have had a lot of success with Alaskans, by the way.
Yes, they have. Yes, they have. I mean, Mark
Schlereth. There was another player too back in the 80s or 70s that did pretty well for them. Yep. But anyways, he actually had a great showing too. Showed off, extreme quickness and fluidity and smoothness, which is something that you wanted to see, because when you watch his tape, he doesn't seem as fluid or smooth. So it's something that you gonna have to go back and watch a little bit of him. But he was born and raised in Anchorage. Can't remember what high school he went there. Then transferred to Nevada to a high school moved to Nevada to with his family. At his request, if I remember right, to actually pursue a football career, going to one of the higher top best high schools there in Nevada.
Yeah. George Fox jumping in here. Thanks for your insight into the draft, guys. It does help us understand who to keep an eye on. Denver Broncos for life. Thank you, George, for the stars over on Facebook. We definitely appreciate your support, and stick around a little bit. We have got plenty more draft content where this is coming from. Quickly, before we transition over to what happened earlier today, the guy that I thought was really kind of proved what he was on the field, but also kind of boosted his stock just a little bit in his on-field performance. Darius Muasa, the linebacker out of UCLA, man. I thought that his movement skills were great. I thought that he did a really good job showing some athleticism, some burst. But the big thing with him was on tape, he's more of a tape player than he is a tester. 4.72 40-yard dash, didn't really show like the crazy high-end athleticism, but his movement skills, man. I thought that he had a really nice day out there yesterday.
The issue with him is he does not fit the mold of a modern linebacker.
I know
he is probably going to be an undrafted free agent who ends up contributing on special teams. He's undersized at this time because the way that NFL teams want their linebackers, they want great length, they want those long arms. and they want that height. They want them to be 6'2", 6'3" plus. And so if you're 6'1" with short arms and you don't run fast, that's going to be hard for you to overcome. I mean, I know a lot of fans were upset about Nakobe Dean falling. Well, he's a guy, and you add in the injury issues he had, as smart as he was, as physical as he was working downhill, he was short with short arms and just had some injury concerns and fell a little bit. Obviously, you know, much better prospect than Marisawa is, but so yeah, he's a guy that he just kind of confirmed that he's going to be a special teams linebacker. If he can grow into it, who will be undrafted, he'll get a shot somewhere. Maybe, you know, maybe a team will take him as 7th round pick to add something to their special teams unit. You know, the 6th and 7th round picks are often used for undrafted free agents that you don't think you'll be able to sign, or special teams. So maybe he can go there. But yeah, he just kind of confirmed that he is what he is.
That's unfortunate, because I really like his tape, man. That dude flies around. He's all over the football. Like every single time that a ball carrier goes to the ground, Musawa is right there next to him, man. He was a lot of fun to watch. Let's go to today. We got a question earlier about these cornerbacks and some of the high flying speeds that we got. Obviously Quinn Mitchell. We got Nate Wiggins running a 4.29 and then blowing a hip flexor, from what I understand. Multiple players in the 4.3s, a handful of players that were sub 4.45. Man, this group is fast and they are athletic and they are very fun to watch out there on the field, man. Who stood out to you the most today?
I mean, corner.
I want the one most standout player right now.
From corner.
Yep.
Let me see here.
I'm putting you on the spot for a reason.
Yeah. It'd be very easy to go with one of the guys who ran fast. But I'm probably going to go with I think I'm going to go with the guy who ran a little bit slower. And it's unfortunate I haven't been able to watch him yet. And my mouth is watering with the thought of getting to watch him, going and finding tape of him. Miles Harden out of South Dakota. Ran a 4.5 flat.
Oh, I was hoping you weren't going to say his name.
He ran a 4.5 flat 40, which is fine. I mean, nowadays anything under a 4.6 you're fine with. 4.6 is the death number nowadays for corners. And I think it was last year, might have been the year before, there was a general manager who talked about how 4.6 is the death number for corners, and how anybody who runs slower than that, their ability to be successful in the NFL is hurt. And there's been only like 2 corners who've ran slower in the last like 15, 20 years, who've ran slower than 4.6 40 at the combine, that have gone on to have, you know, be successful. But anyways, so he ran a good time. Yeah, it's from what Daniel Jeremiah said. Obviously I haven't watched him, so I hadn't been able to go and find out my expectation. It's about where you expected him to be at with it. But man, the technique and the footwork through the drills was probably the best of all the corners that were there. It was clean, it was consistent, it was smooth, and he looked a lot faster than he was because of how smooth and fluid he was in his lower half.
For a small school kid, this kid's out of South Dakota, not South Dakota State, the Jackrabbits that's won back-to-back national championships at the FCS level. No, South Dakota. He's built well. He's thick in his lower half. He's got fluid hips. His feet are super clean. He's very well balanced. He's got good ball skills from what we saw. He traces the football in the air very well. Quicker, good explosiveness from what you could see on those drills. Man, Miles Harden was the one guy that I thought stood out the most specifically. There's another couple of guys that I thought played pretty well today out there in terms of performance in the on-field drills. One guy that I like a lot out of TCU, Josh Newton. I thought that his performance today really kind of boosted his stock, maybe from a late day 3 guy to maybe early day 3, 4th, 5th round pick. Eric, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's another guy who I liked when I watched his tape. He's a guy that I'm going to go back and take a look on, because he looked a lot better, and his notes that I got from the combine don't fully match up with the notes that I got from his tape. Just going to go watch probably another 2, maybe 3 games of his, see if I can't, see some of the stuff that he showed today, to put him in, to figure out where to place him, where he grades out at. So it definitely was, a good showing. And anybody who sits there and makes you, as an analyst, as a scout, whatever, makes you want to go back and watch a little bit more of their tape, typically is a good thing. Obviously, there's some occasions where it was so bad that you got to go back and try to figure out what it is. But for the most part, it's typically a good thing.
Yeah. Who else stood out to you the most today?
Moving on to safeties a little bit. Jalen Carley's out of Missouri, 227 pounds, ran a 4.540. And he's a guy who he's going to move to linebacker. Like there's no doubt in my mind he's going to move to linebacker in the NFL. But I think with what he did with the athletic testing, he tested well and everything, especially at his size. His RAS is going to be high, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then the drills, like keep coming back to it, how smooth they look. And you always want to look for smoothness in the drills because it means that their technique is clean. You don't want clunkiness because, well, then their technique's not clean, their footwork's not clean. And he was just very clean with it and smooth and showed really good range, and just stood out consistently every single drill. Wasn't one of the best ever, or wasn't the best every single time, but he's definitely one of the best showers in each one, which at 227 pounds to move the way that he did, it's definitely, definitely catches your eye.
Yeah, I didn't get to see a whole lot of the safety drills. I was making dinner and kind of getting prepared for the show a little bit. A couple of things that I did notice with the safety group, Dadrian Taylor Demerson, the USC kid, was just incredible. He's a fluid mover, did really well in the position drills. Cole Bishop, a guy that you and I kind of talked about when those were getting started. You were saying, it didn't translate on tape for you. What did you think of his performance today?
Yeah, I mean, Cole Bishop, he's a guy that I figured another one of those guys that's probably going to be asked to bulk up a little bit, be kind of this hybrid safety linebacker, just because when you watch his tape, the farther away from the line of scrimmage he gets, the worse he is. He is not a guy that does well in space. And today I wasn't expecting him to show good range through the drills, and he did. He ran well. He ran fast. 4.45, I think 40, which was a really good time for him when we were coming in. And I was talking to people about it. They were saying we don't think that he breaks 4.7. So significantly faster time than expected. Have to wonder, how much weight did he drop, because there's been some chatter that he played closer to about 220 pounds, came in weighing at like 206, 205, something like that. So you have to wonder how much that impacted it. But still, even then, dropping that much weight, running that fast, it helped him show more range and everything. That could then become his play weight. That, hey, we don't want you to put this weight back on. We want you to play at this weight because you can do more for our defense at this weight. So it was a good showing for him, and definitely he's not a guy that, despite it, I probably won't go back and watch, unless through a couple conversations I come to get told that I need to, but just because of the weight drop aspect to it.
Yeah. Michael Ronquillo jumping in here. Last minute, guys, if you got any other burning questions, throw a super chat in there for us and we'll definitely get to it. If not, we're going to wrap up here in just a couple minutes. But Mike jumping in here at the tail end of the show, asking for our thoughts on Clemson cornerback Nate Wiggins, who today unfortunately suffered a hip flexor strain. Sounds like he's going to be ready to go and do all of the drills for the Clemson Pro Day, according to what he was saying through Stacey Dales on NFL Network earlier. 4.29 40, hyper athletic player. Eric, what do you think on Nate Wiggins?
He's thin.
He's very thin.
And he's gonna take a huge hit for my rankings, not because of the injury, not because of anything, because at the combine, because he's thin, he's not physical, and he doesn't defend the run. Like he will step aside and let the ball carrier go by him. Basically, that's the type of run defense he gets. He is not my type of corner. He is very scheme specific, and definitely have to have hard hitting safeties behind him to make up for his issues, his liability aspect as being a run defender, basically.
No, I haven't got a chance to watch Nate Wiggins enough, so I'm going to bow myself out of this conversation. But I do know that he is hyper athletic, twitchy lower half, really long legs. Like you could see that even with him running today, his legs are very long, and that's probably one of the issues that he's going to have at the NFL level. And I know that that was something that has been relayed to you and also to me as well. That with just the build that he has, he's probably going to be injury prone at the next level, especially in his lower half. Hamstrings, quads, groins, stuff like that is going to be something you're going to have to watch out for with him. And it popped up today, unfortunately. And I don't want to, speak ill of the injured by any stretch of the imagination, but when you have a player that has those risks going into things, it's definitely something you need to take note of when you're filling out your evaluation of a player. Ronk jumping back in here again. Great show tonight, Lance and Eric on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Go Broncos! Thank you, Michael. Thank you everybody for joining us. Eric, I got a couple of just little quick ones that I want to throw at you. USC safety Kalen Bullock. This dude, a little thin, but he is rangy. He is athletic. He is fluid. He was one of the big showers today at the safety position. He really caught my eye. I can't wait to go back and take a look at him, man. What do you think of him? And is he potentially an outside player? Can he get a shot at cornerback? Because he's got movement skills for it.
Yeah, he's probably going to get a shot at, corner, give him a little bit of that, those opportunities during mini camps and OTAs in late May, early June, maybe even into training camp a little bit. But the big knock for me is his tackling. He improved on it this year. There is I believe it was from the Tulane Bowl game, not this past season, but the season before, where he just completely whiffs a tackle. And it went viral and just was just such a bad showing. A lot of missed tackles on his tape, a lot of poor tackle technique. Improved a little bit this year, but it's still a concern going in. He's willing against the run. He's willing to be physical, but he's just got to clean up that technique for it to carry over for him. But yeah, he's probably going to get a shot at corner before he, probably settles at safety in the NFL.
Yeah. We've got Duke Rose jumping in here with an all capitals. Is there a tight end that you guys like? We didn't get a chance to really break him down, Eric. I'll give you just the Cliff Notes version here because I didn't get to watch much of the tight end in terms of the drills and stuff like that. Anybody at tight end that stood out today?
With how little that I was able to watch of it, it's definitely difficult. What I did see of it, Ben Sinnott, with his athletic testing, he's the tight end that I was mentioned earlier in the show, near the beginning, that I'm gonna have to go back and watch because I do not see this explosion, this athletic testing that he had. I do not see it on tape. Jatavian Sanders, he's a guy that he ran slow, but when you watch his tape, you were expecting a slow time. He's one of those guys that plays faster than he runs, and we always get a couple of them every single year. Just the play speed is there, but just doesn't test well for whatever reason. AJ Barner didn't run, but he looked good in the drills. Tip Ryman, I mean, he absolutely killed it from outside of his press conference, he killed it every step of the way. And then Culp out of Washington, Devin Culp, I think is his first name.
Yeah.
He's a guy that really stood out. He's kind of one of those what's the right term here? Athletically built tight ends that you just kind of want to, bring along as a tight end and see what he can do for you in the next year or two.
Yeah. Sounds good, man. It's been a lot of fun these last couple of days. You and I have done a lot of watching the combine together, going back and forth and comparing notes. And tonight was just a great way for us to be able to explain what we've seen to you for the last couple of days. Eric, it's always a great time with you on a Friday evening here for Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Thank you all for joining us here. We got to give a shout out to everybody who helped us out in the chat. We got Papa Bear, David McElrath, Kathy. We got Michael Ronquillo several different times. Naj Altaf out there. Gary Palmer as well joining us. Phil McLaughlin. We got Casey Nickel in the house. We've got Williams James Baker for the first time in this show. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully you stick around. Hopefully you enjoyed what we brought to you. David Youngkin as well. George Fox for joining us here later towards the end of the show. Thank you all for joining us here on Dove Valley Deep Divers. For Erick Trickel, I am Lance Sanderson. You all stay safe and take care. Have a great rest of your weekend, and as always, go Broncos. We'll see you guys same time, same place next week.